That sudden, visceral flare-up, it can feel less like an emotion and more like a psychological ambush, a system-wide failure of the self you work so hard to present to the world. It begins not with a major confrontation, but with a subtle, almost imperceptible stimulus, the specific cadence of a sigh from your partner that implies a long-standing disappointment, the particular way a colleague phrases feedback that feels less like critique and more like an erasure of your contribution, or the fleeting micro-expression of dismissiveness on a stranger's face that somehow, inexplicably, lands with the force of a physical blow. In a nanosecond, a primal circuit within the limbic system ignites, completely bypassing the prefrontal cortex, the seat of rational thought and executive function. This is not a conscious choice. It is an autonomic hijacking. You feel it as a profound physical truth, a tight coil of heat twisting in the chest, a jaw clenching like a fist, a wave of adrenaline that colors your perception and narrows your focus to a single burning point of contention. Internally, a narrative engine spins into overdrive, weaving a complex story of personal disrespect, profound injustice, or deep-seated slight, often connecting this moment to a long chain of similar historical grievances. You might then employ every modern tool in your mental arsenal: the measured counting of breaths, the stoic attempt to detach, the frantic repetition of mantras urging calm. But the reaction feels ancient and preordained, a hijacking of your modern higher self by a more ancient, wounded part of your psyche, what we might call the inner protector who mistakes a paper cut for a mortal wound. Long after the event has passed, the echo remains, playing on a loop in the theater of your mind, draining your emotional energy and productive focus, leaving you to wonder in frustration why you, a competent, intelligent, and generally resilient person, can be so thoroughly unraveled by something so seemingly small and insignificant. This universal human experience, according to the profound work of Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung, is far more than a simple breach of social etiquette or a test of personal patience. It is a profound, albeit painful, form of encrypted communication from the depths of your own unconscious, a signal flare from a lost part of your soul. Jung proposed that these intense irritations are not random malfunctions of our personality, but precise, albeit cryptic, signals designed to get our attention. They reveal the exact coordinates where the external world has brushed against an internal, unseen, and unhealed wound. The people who trigger us most powerfully, therefore, are not merely antagonists in our life story, they are unwitting messengers and unexpected mirrors, forcibly holding up a reflection of the fragmented, disowned, and unintegrated parts of ourselves, the very hidden parts we must courageously face, acknowledge, and embrace to achieve true, unshakable emotional freedom and become whole. To comprehend the true nature of a triggered response is to fundamentally reorient your understanding of your own emotional landscape. When another person's action, a subtle shift in body language, a specific choice of words laden with implication, or a silence that feels heavier than any shout, precipitates that immediate, surging wave of anger within you, it is absolutely critical to recognize that this powerful, all-consuming reaction is almost never about the literal, surface-level content of the exchange. The comment itself is merely the trigger. It is not the source of the explosion. Rather, that intense flare of anger operates as a sophisticated, albeit brutal and primal, internal defense mechanism. It erupts specifically in response to a sudden and unexpected psychological exposure, a feeling of being seen in a way you did not consent to, of having a hidden vulnerability abruptly illuminated. It is a profound psychic alarm bell, clanging loudly to signal that an external stimulus has just made direct contact with a raw, unhealed nerve you may not have even consciously known existed, a nerve connected to a much deeper and older story. You do not typically experience this specific, soul-shaking variety of anger when someone critiques an aspect of yourself that you have fully accepted, integrated, and owned.
In those cases, you might feel a flicker of annoyance or a need to defensively explain, but you can process it logically and remain fundamentally centered in your sense of self. The true, lingering fury, the kind that replays in your mind for hours and feels physically hot, ignites precisely when someone, often completely unknowingly and without malice, holds up a mirror to a part of you that is fragile, hidden, unconscious, unclaimed, or profoundly unloved. This is the exclusive territory of what Jung termed your shadow, the internal repository for every trait, desire, impulse, and perceived weakness that you were once conditioned, whether by family, society, or trauma, to suppress, hide, disown, or be deeply ashamed of. Therefore, this anger must not be mistaken for a simple character flaw or a personal failing to be eliminated through sheer willpower or better manners. It is, in fact, a crucial and intelligent messenger delivering a vital and urgent communique from the depths of your unconscious mind. It is a psychic pain signal, a kind of internal radar that pinpoints with uncanny accuracy the exact location of a wounded, exiled part of your being, a part that is now crying out from the shadows, demanding your conscious attention, your understanding, your compassionate acceptance, and ultimately your healing integration. To dismiss or suppress the anger is to violently ignore the messenger and thus guarantee its return with greater force next time. But to pause, to lean in with curiosity, and to courageously heed its message is to begin the most critical and transformative journey of your life, the journey back to your whole self.
To genuinely deconstruct the potent mechanism of an emotional trigger is to venture beyond surface-level psychology and into the profound, often hidden architecture of the self, a structure built and shaped as much by what we have consciously excluded and rejected as by what we have consciously chosen to include and display. The shadow, a central and revolutionary concept within the Jungian framework, is far more complex than a simple mental junk drawer for our socially inconvenient or bad traits. It is the living, breathing, and dynamic psychological record of every innate instinct, raw impulse, passionate desire, and innate human capacity that we were systematically conditioned by well-meaning parents, prevailing cultural norms, personal trauma, or the simple necessity to survive and belong to deem unacceptable, excessive, dangerous, or shameful. From our earliest, most formative years, we learn to navigate the complex social world not by expressing our full, authentic selves, but by strategically constructing a manageable and acceptable identity, a persona, which acts as our public-facing mask and our psychological contract with society. This mask is meticulously crafted from a place of deep need. If our childhood assertiveness was met with punishment or dismissal, we painstakingly reconstruct ourselves as agreeable people pleasers, burying our natural leadership. If our innate emotional sensitivity was shamed as a weakness, we laboriously build a facade of stoic, unflappable logic, walling off our capacity for deep feeling. If our boundless curiosity and exuberance were met with adult irritation or neglect, we learn to play small, to become quiet and unobtrusive, severing our connection to joy and spontaneity. Crucially, every trait, every spark of individuality that didn't seamlessly fit the prescribed mold wasn't simply gently set aside, it was actively severed from our conscious identity through a process of psychic surgery and forcibly exiled into the murky depths of the unconscious, where it doesn't vanish, but instead coalesces and organizes into a semi-autonomous complex, the shadow. This is not a passive, benign process of forgetting, but an energetic and ongoing act of repression, requiring a constant psychological effort to keep this material at bay. And like any repressed energy, be it water behind a dam or steam in a sealed kettle, it does not disappear, but instead gains a potent pressurized force in the darkness, perpetually seeking expression through indirect, symbolic, and often disruptive channels, in our inexplicable moods, our compulsive behaviors, our projective judgments,
and most vividly in our intense, irrational reactions to others. Therefore, when you encounter an individual who unconsciously and unabashedly embodies the very trait you have painstakingly repressed for decades, when you see the arrogance of a colleague that perfectly mirrors your own suppressed confidence and right to take up space, or the raw neediness of a friend that reflects your own disowned and starved desire for unconditional care, or the chaotic, irresponsible freedom of a stranger that highlights the exhausting rigidity of your own tightly wound control, the intense, visceral, and often disproportionate reaction of hatred or anger you feel is not merely a simple dislike for their behavior. It is a profound, soul-level allergic reaction, a psychic immune response kicking in to reject what it has been programmed to see as a foreign and threatening toxin. It is the terror and rage of your unconscious self recognizing its own exiled, forgotten reflection in the outside world, a reflection you were taught to reject and have therefore spent a lifetime running from. The powerful hatred you feel is, at its core, a hatred of that disowned part of yourself, projected outward onto a convenient target for safekeeping, because the terrifying prospect of reclaiming it, of reintegrating that lost energy and facing the original childhood wound that necessitated its exile, feels, in that moment of triggering, infinitely more dangerous and destabilizing than simply blaming the person who have the audacity to hold up the mirror.
The ultimate objective of this profound inner work, far from being a passive state of numb detachment, is the active and heroic cultivation of psychological sovereignty, a state of empowered, conscious wholeness where you possess the capacity to fully experience the entire tumultuous spectrum of human emotion, from searing rage to profound grief, without being unconsciously controlled, defined, or hijacked by it. This transformational process, which Jung termed individuation, represents nothing less than the evolution of the human psyche from a state of primitive autonomic reactivity to one of sophisticated conscious responsiveness. It is a journey from being a passive prisoner of your own unconscious historical wounds to becoming the active architect of your present and future self. This transformation begins not in a therapist's office abstractly, but practically and immediately in the very nanosecond you feel the familiar adrenalizing surge of a trigger, that specific tightening in the gut, the heat flushing the skin, the narrowing of visual focus. In that critical moment, you must consciously initiate what neuroscientists call a top-down regulation, overriding the amygdala's hijack of your limbic system by forcefully engaging the prefrontal cortex. You create a sacred, non-negotiable pause, a moment of suspended judgment and action, akin to slamming on the psychic brakes. Within this breath of space, this sanctuary in time, you initiate a gentle but firm inner dialogue, a process of Socratic self-inquiry that is the bedrock of integration. You must ask, with ruthless compassion, what specific, precise quality in this person's behavior or character feels so existentially threatening to me? Is it their audacity, their indifference, their perceived superiority? What ancient, familiar feeling of helplessness, insignificance, rejection, or engulfment did this moment suddenly and violently awaken from its slumber? What specific old narrative, perhaps a childhood story of being too much or not enough, of being unsafe, unloved, or inherently flawed, is being retold, reenacted, and projected onto this present interaction, coloring it with the pain of the past? This disciplined practice of archaeological self-inquiry is the essential alchemical tool. It allows you to gently yet deliberately trace the radioactive energy of your reaction back through the neural pathways and layers of your personal history to its original source,
often a formative pre-verbal wound, a forgotten trauma, or a deeply ingrained core belief formed in a moment of powerlessness long ago. In doing so, you perform the most powerful act of reclamation possible. You withdraw the overwhelming authority and validity you had previously ceded to external events and other people's behaviors, and you return that power to its rightful place within your own conscious awareness. You cease to be a passive victim of circumstance, buffeted by the storms of other people's shadows, and you become the active author and editor of your inner world. This is not about excusing or condoning poor behavior in others. It is about radically refusing to let their unconscious behavior continue to dictate your internal state and stability. It is the arduous but glorious process of integrating the shadow, a process not of fighting the darkness with force, but of bringing the relentless, compassionate light of your conscious awareness to it, thereby transforming what was once a source of chaotic, externalized reactivity into a wellspring of profound personal power, unwavering self-awareness, and ultimate liberation. This is how you transmute leaden trauma into golden wisdom.
True emotional sovereignty, the magnificent and hard-won prize awaiting at the culmination of this arduous inner journey, is not a cold, detached, or sterile state of robotic indifference, but rather a warm, vibrant, and deeply grounded state of unwavering self-awareness and unshakable self-possession. It represents the final, triumphant stage of a profound psychological metamorphosis, where the fragmented pieces of the self are not discarded, but are masterfully integrated into a cohesive and resilient whole. This is the profound peace that arrives not from the naive hope for a life devoid of conflict or external storms, but from the unbreakable, internalized knowledge that you have painstakingly built yourself an architectural marvel of an internal sanctuary, a psychic structure so secure, so self-sustaining, and so deeply rooted in truth that external chaos, judgment, and negativity can rage against its walls, yet find no point of entry, no vulnerability to exploit. Imagine with vivid clarity facing the very same person or situation, the perpetually critical parent, the passively condescending colleague, the emotionally unpredictable and withholding partner that once possessed the terrifying power to dismantle your entire day, hijack your emotional equilibrium, and erode your fundamental sense of self-worth. Now, you observe their same ingrained patterns with the detached focus of a scientist. You hear their same carefully chosen words without the old emotional charge. You register their same turbulent energy without feeling the need to either absorb it or deflect it with force. And yet, within the deepest chambers of your being, there is no war, no panic, no spiral, only a calm, clear, and almost anthropological understanding. They have not changed their behavior, for that was never the point of this work. But you have undergone a fundamental revolution of being. You have made profound, compassionate peace with your own shadows. You have sat with your disowned neediness and understood its roots. You have acknowledged your suppressed arrogance as a distorted cry for respect. You have comforted your exiled sensitivity and recognized it as a strength. And so, the reflection they now hold up no longer holds any captivating, destructive, or definitive power over you. This is the sublime essence of integration. The once feared, exiled parts are now welcomed, understood, and valued citizens of your inner world. Their raw energy harmonized into the symphony of your personality rather than suppressed as a dissonant threat. This hard-earned unity allows you to act from a place of profound personal agency and choice, not from the ancient, compulsive scripts of trauma and defense.
You can now set impeccable, firm boundaries from a place of calm clarity and self-respect, not from a well of seething hatred or bitter resentment. You can receive criticism without internally crumbling, because your self-worth is no longer a shaky, temporary structure built on the shifting sand of external approval, but is a fortress founded on the immutable bedrock of your own documented self-acceptance and earned self-regard. You can experience rejection without questioning your fundamental lovability or place in the world, because your internal capacity to love, validate, and champion yourself now far exceeds any single person's limited ability to withhold that validation from you. Your peace is therefore no longer a fragile performance, a temporary ceasefire dependent on everything in your external environment aligning perfectly. It is the unshakable, lived truth of your being, an internal climate that remains constant regardless of the external weather. You are no longer defined by another's praise or their insult, their attention or their silence, because you have finally and completely come home to yourself, not as a perfect, finished product, but as a whole, authentic, and gloriously complex human being, radiantly capable of holding all your own contradictions, strengths, and vulnerabilities without fracture or self-betrayal.